Hello and welcome to Precontation Points Video Snack. I read books so that you don't have to. I'm continuing my read-through of Vivid by Ashley Bustamante. Not the first video, go check out the others. Links are posted below. Chapter 19. Aside from feeling so breakable on the outside, my mental state is perilously close to shattering. I can't think straight anymore. I remember things that didn't really happen. Or did they? Wow, it's almost like removing something that's a core identity trait isn't good for one's mental health or something. How weird is that? Eva feels completely adrift without her powers, and her mental state is actually getting worse rather than better. She keeps thinking of her parents wearing yellow gems even though she knows that they were red. She thinks about a door of her childhood home being painted yellow even though she actually remembers it being red. She wanders around bumping into things, getting minor cuts and bruises, but is unable to heal herself. She has to hide since if the others saw her with a small cut, they'd wonder why she hadn't healed herself. What's worse is that without her classes, she mostly just sits in her room or wanders the halls. She feels claustrophobic inside, but whenever she leaves the hall, she has to hold back the urge to throw open the gates and leave to find Elm. She runs into Blake, who is on a break between his classes. He invites her to sit with him, and seems to be the singular person who actually cares about Ava's shattered mental state. She asks if he's ever had his world fall apart, and then confesses that she's going to be unable to finish school. She doesn't know what her future holds. Concerned for her, Blake takes her to Dr. Iris. The doc quickly sends Blake away and tells Ava that Celine told her what had happened. And I have to say that in a single page, Dr. Iris is more concerned over Ava's physical and emotional well-being than Celine has been in 19 chapters. She lets Ava cry and then cleans a cut Ava got the old-fashioned way. And then she tells Ava to write in order to keep herself distracted. Back in her room, Ava stares at an empty notebook as she ponders what Dr. Iris had told her to write about. Her magic initiation ceremony. We jump back to when Ava was around 5 years old with her parents the day of the ceremony. Her parents are both wearing yellow. Ava is anxious over the ceremony, but that almost seems par for the course. She walks over to the 2 blocks, but it lights up orange rather than one of the 3 primary colors. Celine says that she's heard of this before, dual color magic. It's rare but not impossible. However, she's quick to say that the elementary school, called Bright, has banned yellow magic and Prism has adopted that policy, and goes on to say that she's certain that it wouldn't be long before it's banned everywhere. And that for the sake of the child, it would be best if she were to only focus on red magic. However, Lucas Locke doesn't see it that way and only thinks that they would be preventing Ava from reaching her full potential simply because they're afraid of what might happen. Emphasis on might. But he promises Celine that they'll think about it. On the way back, Lucas and Vivian fight over this. Lucas is of the opinion that they shouldn't have trusted Celine, but Vivian wanted what's best for her child. Lucas says that it's only best if you're red or blue. Vivian is for pretty much everything Celine said, but it's obvious that Lucas doesn't want to shield his daughter from an entire part of who she is. But as they continue to fight, it sounds obvious that the world is already starting to become divided about yellow magic. Vivian is of the hope that a dual orange magic user like Ava would be able to unite people together. Lucas is terrified that if Celine has access to Ava, she'll only just brainwash the girl into hating yellows too. That night, the benefactors and Celine come to the lockhouse. Ava hears them in the next room and goes running to her parents, only to have to witness the Reds literally murder her own parents in front of her. Oh, and it seems as though Jace is yellow, which sure explains a lot. Ava comes back to herself in the present. She sits there and has the sudden realization that literally every single thing she knows is an outright lie, controlled and manufactured by the benefactors. And she thinks that the only reason why some of the memories are starting to seep through is because of some natural resistance thanks to her being yellow. But most importantly, her thoughts on Celine. Obviously, Ava is now aware that Celine is nothing but a monster, that she wanted Ava's blind obedience before she started to train Ava's yellow powers, if only to secretly control the population while Ava pretended to be a red. Ava suddenly feels a wave of intense remorse for Elm, because the benefactors called Elm a monster, but he simply wanted to exist. They told him that his existence was a danger to society. They're doing the exact same things that they're accusing Elm of doing. She wants to go to him, but worries about how Celine has probably been keeping a close eye on him. She tries to lock it, but it doesn't seem to work against her non-magical self right now. So she just goes to the forest regardless. However, without magic, she literally just sees the cave and nothing more. She calls out for him, waits some, and then realizes that his boat isn't there, so she follows the river out to the field where the sunflowers are. He's there tending to them. She runs to him and apologizes over and over while clinging to him. She then tells him what happened, about her magic and how once it was gone, whatever Jace had done to her mind wore off. Elm implies that he does know, but he hadn't exactly wanted to play his hand until he could trust Ava not to run off to the benefactors and turn him over. He says that he'll tell her everything back inside the cave because Ava is vulnerable outside with no magic to shield her in any way. Chapter 20. When Elm was 4, he was already showing such a strong inclination towards yellow that Jace began to mentor him. At this time, things were already starting to get pretty bad for yellows, and it was played up by the media, who reported heavily on yellow crimes despite all three colors seeming to be equal as far as crime goes. Protesters would gather outside of yellow's homes, to the point that Elm's parents feared for their safety and sent Elm to stay with Jace for a while. However, they were brutally murdered, and Elm is sure that he would be dead if he hadn't been with Jace. As you can imagine, there's no driving force quite like the thought of your parents being murdered simply for existing. Elm studied hard. He found the cave where he began his experiments, all of which he kept secret from Jace. While that was going on, a flat-out genocide of yellows was going on around Magnus. One day, Jace came and said that it would be best if they went along with the benefactors, just to survive. Obviously, Elm refused, but he hadn't known at the time that the big push to get rid of the yellows was thanks to color traders like Jace, who used his powers to convince people to destroy other yellows. It was at this time that the barrier around Magnus was put up, but keeping Stone's power takes a lot of work, and it was obvious that it was too much for Jace to keep up on his own, so he went out and captured Elm with a bunch of benefactors. From the time he was 12, they'd had Elm hooked up to machines to keep him powering various things. They kept him in a dream state in order to maintain their control over him, but the problem with yellows is that dreams are kind of where they thrive, and so during his captivity he grew stronger regardless. There was a power surge that lasted for just seconds, but it was enough for him to get away. That was when he had his first encounter with Ava. However, even when he was in the cave, he wasn't sure if anything was real or not, and even if it was worth it to have gotten free. When he encountered Ava in the woods, he flicked her on the forehead in order to have access to her mind. From there, he would use her mind as a stepping stone to the minds of the benefactors. But we already know what Ava dreamt about every night. This is because of her yellow magic, even though it shouldn't have been remotely possible. He says at first he wanted to use her as revenge against what the Magnus government did to him, to all of the yellows, but obviously once he got to know her, his motives changed a lot. However, as Ava thinks about Elm's story, she has a sudden realization. He says that he escaped when there was a sudden surge of power. It was right around the time that Ava tried to do magic alone in the forest. She goes on to explain that she'd been trying to use red magic to protect her mind and thinks that the mix-up with her orange affinity was what inadvertently freed Elm. After a moment, she goes on and says that she thinks he's another dual magic user, but with blue because he can make things physically real sometimes. Elm isn't convinced, but promises that they'll find some way to figure that out. Ava then asks why it is that he didn't kiss her that one time. He insists that it was because she'd think that he'd manipulated her mind into wanting it. He kisses her, and then she kisses him back. Chapter 21. They go back to the school. Until Ava's powers are returned, they need to pretend like everything is perfectly alright with Ava. She doesn't like it, but agrees that it would be the best course of action for now. Back in the school, Ava runs into Celine, who naturally asks where she'd been. Celine goes on and says that she might have been too hasty in removing Ava's powers. But as they go to her office, Ava begins to have her doubts and feels like this might be a trick. However, as Celine unlocks where she put the magic container, Ava realizes that it's now orange instead of pure red. Even that has been tainted by Jace's mind control, apparently. And then as Ava goes to put her power back, somebody knocks her over the head and she blacks out. Ava wakes up bound to something, with Celine all but laughing over her. She calls Ava a traitor, but Ava is quick to call her out on her hypocritical nonsense. I realized my mistake a little too late. It hadn't occurred to me that removing your powers would reset your memories. I had thought that once a memory was altered, it stayed altered. Honestly, not your brightest moment, Celine. And then she actually has the audacity to go full Mother Gothel on Ava. She raps in about how she cared for Ava over the years and made sure she did well in school. Again, Ava is quick to call Celine out on her nonsense, especially considering how Celine literally murdered Ava's parents in front of her. Celine continues on for a while before she basically tells a random red magic user, Veronica, to begin torturing Ava, which is literally the only reason why Ava was given her magic back, for this torture. And I would ask why she's suddenly going to start torturing a girl that she's basically raised. But honestly, this is the lady who seemed to spearhead efforts to genocide a third of the population. Celine and Veronica want information, but I don't know what they expect Ava to tell them. Veronica begins to torture her until Ava blacks out. This goes on for a while, with Ava blacking out and waking up only for the torture to start all over again. Eventually, Veronica seems to get bored with the torture and decides to just start drawing on the color of Ava's blood. Ava says something about Elm, and that's when Elm shows up and starts torturing Veronica. Nothing like showing up 15 minutes late with Starbucks Betty. Elm pushes Veronica past the point of mental sanity, although it's hard to care for somebody who seemed to get enjoyment out of torturing people, and even harder to care about a character who was just introduced in this chapter alone. Thanks for listening to my chapter-by-chapter review of Vivid. I'm going to post a new video every day until I run out of chapters. Once I finish with Vivid, I promise to get back to the regular Monday update schedule and resume Fury. Just as a reminder, even if you can't financially support me, there are other ways to help me out. The first is watching this video as well as all my other videos. It's also important to like and subscribe. Finally, you can share this video with all of your friends so that they can help as well. If you're already caught up with all of my videos, you can go to Tumblr for my main book snarks, always free and updated every morning. And if you've already read all of my main snarks, you can find even more snark on my Patreon. You can access it for $1 a month. Members also get early access to my main Tumblr snark. Special thanks to Dawn, Phoebe, and Nikki for supporting me on Patreon already. If you want to hear your name in my video next week, either support me on Patreon or make a one-time donation. Do you like my snark so much that you want me to snark your writing? I do that too. For just $6 per chapter, I will tell you how awful that your writing is. But not to worry if you feel like you couldn't take the criticism. I also offer regular book editing as well, just 1 cent per word. You can contact me on any of my social media platforms if you have further questions. If you want to read some of the things that I've written, you can purchase my works on Amazon. I have a slew of erotic short stories and now 2 full-length novels. I also sometimes run flash sales on my stories, and if you don't follow me on any social media, you might want to do that just so you can know when I might be offering more things for free. Links for everything will be posted below. See you tomorrow, guys!